Are we ready for the gorgeous, inimitable, irreverent, irrepressible Shobha Day? I'm not hearing the applause loud enough. I really need more. I need more. I need more. I need more. More. Okay. Before we introduce a very, very special guest who's going to be in conversation with Shobha, I can't resist asking a couple of questions. Shobha Day just has a new book out. She is a brilliant, prolific writer, irrepressible, as I said. It's called The Sensual Self. And I want you to tell us, this book is about, in a way, the gap between men and women when it comes to the senses, sensual pleasure, and the fact that nobody even has these conversations. What made you write this book?
Exactly what you just said. No one is having these conversations. And it's actually a very deep subject. It's a philosophical subject. It's not a halka-fulka book about how to make love, though that too.
Yeah.
But we tend to underestimate even that in relationships, because I think the most important relationship anyone under 30 is having is with their telephone, with their phones, cell phones. And I see young couples in restaurants, they're on a date.
Yeah.
The date is an individual date, respectively, that they're having with whatever they're scrolling.
Yeah.
And I feel they're losing out on so much. So when I wrote the book, it was out of a sense of, in a bit of a panic. And
Why panic?
Panic because I felt I can see my children growing up somewhat with the same kind of, not making enough time for one another. I have 6 married children.
Wow.
No, 5 of them are married. One is, I hope she'll get married when she decides to get married. But they have great marriages. But the intimacy, that I word, intimacy, that maybe someone at my age feels nostalgic about, which is to do with really emotions, love, tenderness, showing each other that you mean something to one another, tune into each other. It doesn't only have to be what happens in your boudoir, in your bedroom.
Yeah.
And I think there's a generation there for whom perhaps spreadsheets matter more than bed sheets. To put it bluntly.
That's Shobha for you. This is going to be a great conversation. I want to now welcome someone lovely on stage. He could have had a career in business, but he chose to leave it all for his first love, which is storytelling. He has been a movie maker, a writer, a documentary maker, and a relentless champion of human rights, of civil rights, of equality, of pride. I want you to put your hands together to please welcome the amazing Moses Singh on stage. Let's show him some love, guys. And there you are. Thank you. And this is going to be one hell of a conversation, Moses, so I'm going to leave you to it in the moderator's chair, and I will be back shortly, but you guys are going to love this. These two, we call them the storytellers on fire, and that's actually what they are. Shobha, please.
Thank you, Barkha.
Thank
you so much.
Moses.
How are you?
I'm good. And
I've known her since I was 13 years old. So we go back many, many, many decades. I have to tell everyone this little backstory, this little history. I was in a boarding school. I was in the Doon School. And me and my best friend, Hanoot Singh, who's an incredible jeweler, we were obsessed with Stardust. And we couldn't stop reading it month after month. And it was literally like our monthly entertainment, which we used to wait for. And then we knew that the editor of Stardust was this lady called Shobha Day. And we were completely enamored by the way she wrote, by the way she ran the magazine, and especially by the way she wrote the Nita's Natter section, which was just, we loved it. It was so full of every kind of news. And then she went ahead and wrote this incredible debut novel called Socialite Evenings, the first of her 23rd, right?
the first of 28.
28, oh my God, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And
I've lost count myself, honestly.
I'm sure you have. It's been 5
decades,
decades,
keep coming,
right?
but it's wonderful. It's been 53 years of writing.
53 years of writing, and she writes every week, and she writes a few things every week. And she has never missed a deadline. Why don't you tell us all about your discipline? I mean, how have you managed that?
Well, I write every single day, as a matter of fact, because to call yourself a writer, you have to write every single day. Like you call yourself a singer, you have to do your riyaz every single day. You can't say, I'm going to start doing it 3 days before a concert.
Right.
Similarly, like a singer, the more riyaz a singer does, or a classical dancer, there is muscle memory.
Right.
So for a writer, the discipline does not change that much. The more you write, the more sure you are of what you want to say. And I have been journaling since the age of 14. So daily writing, a routine, and cursive writing, which the younger generation, my grandchildren barely know what cursive writing is. They either write in all capitals or they use 2 thumbs to write on phones.
Right.
And across the world, it is a crisis. So I would urge anyone here who is an aspiring writer or just likes writing for themselves, stick to writing at least a page or 2 every day of your life, physically writing a page or 2. Because that keeps even your mind and your hand and the coordination that is needed to complete a thought on paper or on a laptop going. So that discipline does not vary. I write 4 hours a day, no matter what.
Do you have fixed hours every day, or does it keep fluctuating depending on your schedule?
No, it pretty much sticks to a schedule. I start writing around 10:30 in the morning. And sometimes I keep going till 4:30, sometimes 5:30, sometimes 6:30, it depends. But I never shortchange myself of those hours of writing intensely and with all of my being, because there's really no other way to do it. There are no shortcuts. And therefore, when writers talk about a writer's block, I just say, get on with it. Put your nose down and write. What block are you talking about? I mean, to me, I'm sorry if there may be many in the audience who've experienced it, but I see it as something like being too self-indulgent. It's like writing is my vocation. Just as a lawyer has a vocation, a lawyer does not go to court and say, I'm having a lawyer's block. You have to represent your client. A surgeon doesn't walk into surgery saying, I'm having a bad hair day and there's no inspiration happening, so let's reschedule the surgery. Why should writers have a different set of rules for themselves? They are doing a job like everybody else. There's an over-romanticized approach to writing and creativity, and a lot of writers suffer from that syndrome, like they're about to, change the world with the next sentence that they write. And I keep saying, you have not exactly invented penicillin.
Right.
You're writing. You haven't saved lives or stopped, wars can be stopped, but not one writer doing it. It has to be a kind of movement that is often triggered by what a poet or a writer or an artist or a filmmaker says very powerfully. I'm not undermining any of that. But 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, I just launched 5 young, extremely talented debut novelists, all of them women. And I'm very proud of women's voices being heard strongly and emphatically across the world. At a time when I wrote my first book, I was told categorically by my publisher, mind you, that there is no market for women's writing. No one is interested in what women want to say. And for me, that was something that was so deeply offensive. But I took it as a challenge. I could have been negative about it, but nothing in life is worth negativity. Someone throws a challenge at you, pick it up and run with it and show yourself more than the world what you can do with it. So that has always been a kind of guiding principle for me.
But do you ever feel, because I script write, right? And that's the only time I write. And when I'm writing a script, I'm very disciplined about my writing process. But when I'm not script writing, I don't write. So do you write on a day when you don't have an assignment, when you don't have a deadline? Do you just write for your own self, or is it always for someone or a purpose or something that you have to hand in? Do you just write?
Moses, I write even in my sleep. I'm writing even as we are talking. I can never say I switch off, which can be, it can be a huge pressure for maybe someone else.
Right.
it's not that I'm inattentive to the person I'm with. I'm 110% listening to what you're asking me. I'm 110% aware of the audience and Barkha and Ananya and Kumar. All of it is registered, but that's also part of the writing process. Everything registers.
Right.
Everything registers.
So the writing almost happens a lot in your brain, like you're thinking and you're
It's
writing.
simultaneous. It's
Yeah,
a process that never stops. A writer never sleeps, basically, I think.
So do you ever, well, not writer's block because you say that you always pass that, but when you're writing something, sometimes you're in a dilemma about which way you yourself want to go with this. So when you reach a situation like that in, say, your 3 hours or 4 hours of writing every day, and you hit like a wall and you don't know which way to go, what happens to you in moments like that? Do you get up and leave, or do you sit there and let that dilemma pass you by till you reach the solution that you want to reach?
One of the most intense and interesting questions I've ever been asked, Moses. So thank you for asking
Oh, wow.
that.
Thank you.
It is. When only another writer could possibly ask it, because I'm sure you've been at that.
Yeah, because it
crossroad
drives me
yourself.
crazy.
It
drives
drives you nuts. I listen to my intuition, I always have, and my gut feel. And I tell myself that even if it's not the absolutely right decision, this is what my instinct is telling me right now, just go ahead and write it.
Okay.
Not in an irresponsible way.
Right.
But with mindfulness. You're aware of what you're writing.
Right.
You're aware that it could be politically incorrect, but that's the whole point of writing.
Right.
I'm not there to run a PR agency for anyone, and I'm not there to win, a popular award or a popularity contest. I'm there to share my truths such as they are, acceptable to some, not so acceptable to others, unpalatable maybe to many. But this is who I am, this is how I write, this is what I do. And you're free to reject every word of what I've ever written. And I'm free to continue to keep saying what I believe in. And I think that's the whole point.
Well, one thing is for sure that in your entire career, and because I know we have dear friends, but I'm your fan before anything else, and I've been following your career since the age of 13, you have never bent. You have always had spine, and you've always stuck by whatever you have written, and you have never gone back on it, which I think is really very, commendable, yes, but it's also extremely rare, right? That you have such a long body of work, you have such a long career, and do you never get scared? Ever? You're like, oh my God, I know I'm saying this, I know this is going to trigger, because I know how intuitive and perceptive you are as a person, and I know that you're going to trigger something. Do you never get scared because you know that you have to write that, and that is the truth of what you're feeling? Do you never get scared?
The only thing that scares me is cockroaches. No political neta, no political party, no super celebrity, no one. They're human beings like you and me. And just like I have my failings, and there are enough people out there to point those out, troll me, etc. That's part of the game. No person can intimidate me if I know what I'm saying. I can defend, and it's something that is coming from a place where maybe I'm giving a voice to millions out there who don't have a platform. I'm speaking on behalf of citizens. I'm speaking on behalf of women. I'm speaking on behalf of many people who may echo my feelings but don't have the means to put those opinions out there. What comes with the opinions has often been not so very pleasant.
It's
but
death threats and security personnel and sometimes bodyguards.
Yes.
You've had to go through that whole thing.
Yes. But I've done so knowing that that is the risk.
Right.
And it's worth taking. Or I should be doing something completely different. Like I could become a chartered accountant, which I don't have a head for numbers, so even that is out of the question. But something safer than being out there expressing an opinion. But the wonderful thing, Moses, in today's times, is that every single person in the room is equally empowered.
Right.
You don't need a newspaper, or you don't need Barkha to call you on a show, though that all helps. You can express an opinion on any platform of your choice, and that's very democratic, and it's a level playing field for every single person. Why more people don't do it is something that often I wonder about, because they're free to. And what actually bugs me quite often is that people who, even my co-professionals, my colleagues, junior colleagues, they come up to me and say, oh, I think you should be writing a column about X, Y, and Z, whatever it is that they don't want to write about. And I feel that's such a cop-out, that's so cowardly. If you feel so strongly about it, what's stopping you from writing about it? Yes, so having done that, having stuck my neck out, more than, I don't know,
a billion times.
Countless number of times, having faced riots at my door, having faced political parties coming to public occasions where I'm there to launch a book, to blacken my face, invite the media to watch, as they say, Ami Shobhala kasa kai kartoy, something or the other they want to do. Humiliate kasa karna raha, तुम्ही येऊन बघा. आम्ही त्यांचं तोंड, they've even offered, they've often invited the press to watch them gag me with a vada pav, for example. Gag. So they've come with tokeris full of vada pav because they found it somehow insulting that I should make a reference to it. Though I'm Maharashtrian, proud of it, often say it over and over again. I don't know what I need to, I can say alert, sir, no, it's to prove my credentials as a Maharashtrian. But a comment against vada pav, and God, I had the political parties threatening to,
But tell me something,
me.
do you feel A, comfortable, B, safer writing fiction over non-fiction? Because fiction is your imagination running wild and you can do whatever you want, and non-fiction is more kind of in real, truthful things. So do you feel a difference as a writer in your own heart when you're writing either?
Yes, I mean, the personality definitely splits. Non-fiction, like you said, the only limits you place on yourself as a writer is what you impose.
Right.
You are free to express yourself, and if there is anything that is that inflammatory, it's for your editors to tell you or your publishers to say, I'm sorry, but this is kind of...
Have you ever had stuff like that where your editor or your publisher is like, Shobha, no way are we ever printing this? Have you ever had a moment like that?
No, I think I'm pretty good at convincing editors that they are being cowardly, not me.
Okay.
So yeah, I've taken that risk too. And that's part of the fun. That's part how much can you push the boundaries.
Right.
It's part of a writer's job. You're not there to play safe.
Yeah.
If you're playing safe, I've been bored a long time ago, because safe is not sexy.
Yeah.
So I like what I do, and I like the way I do it.
Absolutely. So since we're talking about sexy, I wanted to talk to you about your latest book, right? The Sensual Self, which is your 28th book. When I read the book, I know the book on its immediate level is about sensuality, right? And all aspects of it. But I also found the book incredibly spiritual, because whenever you read anything that is a spiritual text, or you read any kind of book on spirituality or whatever it is, what you're really tapping into is layers of yourself. Yes, exactly. Right? I found a huge similarity between that and what you were talking about. Obviously, you were writing about it in a different way, but I think where you were going with it is the same place. Did you ever feel that The Sensual Self is your most maybe spiritual book to date, without it being obviously spiritual?
Well, it's certainly the most difficult book I've written so far, and that's something my husband also wondered. He said, my God, and so have a lot of my friends, like people like yourself who read it, who've seen a much deeper layer to it. And that's inevitable, because when you're talking sensuality, I mean, I've quoted from Kalidasa to Rumi to Japanese haikus, and various great philosophers and poets from the past, images from the past, cities that are inspiring, sculptures that are inspiring. All of it is part of my own search. Any search that is deep has got to have a spiritual push behind it. Because you're looking within for something that maybe I would do it through words, maybe you do it differently through cinema. And different creative people use their platforms, and eventually the search is the same. It's for the sensual self could as easily be the spiritual self.
Right.
Because it involves all the five senses.
Right.
And you cannot see sensuality in isolation.
Right.
At all. It involves every aspect of our lives, which is why it was written also to remind the young, the very young, that there is a very rich inner life that maybe they're missing out on because they're so focused and determined to achieve targets and goals which may not have the same enriching quality. You may be, maybe their search is completely different. I get that too, because the challenges that the 20-year-olds face today are qualitatively different from anything that I faced, but every generation has their challenge.
Right.
The one big differential is social media, which has revolutionized the way we look, think, talk, eat, consume. So the book was also a reminder to myself about my much younger self and what I enjoyed then. And have I lost touch with that? And if so, isn't it time for me to go back to loving it all over again?
Wow. So do you think when readers read your book, the sensuality in your book, the way
Difficult but terrific question, because the responses that I've had from men who, of course, it's always directed through someone else, because 90% of the men I meet are so intimidated, and sometimes I feel, am I
they're intimidated by you?
They don't ever come and talk to me. They stay miles away and they nudge their wives or girlfriends or someone else who maybe is bolder to come up and speak to me. So I'm used to that, and it's not that I don't understand it. I get it. Their response, again, conveyed through friends, is on a very physical plane. They are focusing on the book. There are many very explicit chapters in the book which talk about our bodies and about our intimate relationships, minus filters, seen from a point of view of a woman, because that's the best perspective I have. For example, for centuries, how we look at ourselves, how we look at lovemaking has been told to us by extremely gifted writers, extremely gifted philosophers. Even the Kama Sutra is written by a man, primarily for other men.
Right.
And I also understand that, because how would a man ever know what a woman expects, wants, feels? It's not possible. They can only guess. And unfortunately, in most societies, women are too embarrassed to even voice desire, even talk about it.
Yeah.
And in 2025, isn't it time those barriers broke down so that intimacy itself can be celebrated in a more meaningful way by both the people involved, by just tuning in and talking about what makes them feel good with each other, without having to feel self-conscious about it.
Right.
So those parts of the book are the ones that men are relating to.
Right.
The softer aspects, the emotional aspects, where I've talked about whether it's the seasons of love, about growing that much older and still feeling the same sense of passion and compassion towards your partner. All of that, I think, has women responding to it. But I also feel strongly that in a country like India, which is sensual in every conceivable way, our climate, our clothes, our colors, our music, our dance, our poetry, our spices, we are not bland like the British.
Right.
So it was only when the British came to India with their bland cuisine and their blandness towards life and towards relationships, I'm sorry, I'm generalizing, that completely killed our own sensual past, our own sensual history, made us all so self-conscious. Till then, we had the Mughals with their poetry, their fountains, their ittars, their fantastic food, their love of miniatures, their art, all of it celebrating every aspect of life.
Right, right.
And then suddenly, what happened? Boom, it was all wiped off.
So do you think that you, well, what are you writing next? Let me ask you that first. Are you writing fiction, non-fiction? Because I know you're constantly writing something or the other. So what are you writing next?
I have a 3-book offer,
Okay.
but I'm not jumping.
And it's fiction or non-fiction?
They leave it to me, most editors. They let me decide my own subjects, which is, I feel I'm very lucky and very privileged to be in a position where I can say, yes, this is what I want to write. And most of the time, they're happy to go with what I'm saying because I write very organically. So
Right.
I can't write to an editorial decision. I'm
Right.
not a writer who, a lot of my contemporaries, no, much younger writers, who may be 100 times more successful than I am, their method, their approach to writing is very different. For
Right.
them, writing is a business model. They start with the business model first, and the
Right.
book comes next. For me, that's the last thing on my mind. I want to write what I enjoy writing, and I hope and pray that the readers will enjoy it too. So yesterday, Moses, I have to share this because I'm still I'm so deeply moved by it that a lady in Marathwada has spent the last, as you know, it's a drought-prone district in Maharashtra, underprivileged, tough, hardly what you'd expect a city audience to even know what life in Marathwada can be. But it's next door to us, but we don't know. We
Right.
don't need to know.
Yeah.
So she has just done her PhD on my work, the relationship of men and women in my fiction. Now, I don't know, this lady, what makes her remarkable is where she comes from. So it's not an urban elite phenomenon. It's not urban elite people who are responding to the books, not because I write the most wonderful books, but because what women are saying is penetrating all the way down. It's not just about all of us in this room. And there are over maybe 250 published dissertations and PhDs on my work across the world.
Wow.
So often they send those to me just to let me know what's going on, and I can, of course, access them in universities across the world. But this woman dedicating so many years of her life to studying my work, that has touched me. And that is my reward as a writer.
That's really amazing. And is it your entire body of work or a few specific books?
The fiction, the relationships between men and women through my fiction, not my non-fiction work. But I know how tough it is for women to carve out that kind of time in our cities, and more so in the smaller cities. They have to do it almost surreptitiously.
Yeah.
But I also know how progressive some of the men in the lives of the women who have taken 10 years off to study my books and present their papers and finally get a PhD awarded to them. I have had them come to my home with their husbands who have said, I lost my wife to you and your books for 10 years. But I don't mind at all because I'm so proud that you got her doctorate.
Wow. That's
The
amazing.
men have supported them, and that's how the women could do it. So we can't keep talking about men and women in confrontational ways. It's just fabulous what we can do together. And
Wow,
that is the
that's
most
amazing.
important. For me, that was the biggest learning.
Okay, I have a fun question before you ask your next question.
Okay.
I just have one fun question. So when you edited Stardust, you invented all these amazing monikers, right? For all our incredible film stars, like for the late and great Dharmendra, it was Garam Dharam. For Jitendra, it was Jumping Jack. For Rajesh
This was
Khanna,
all Shobha.
it was all her. And it
Wow.
was for Rajesh Khanna, it was The Phenomenon.
Shotgun Sinha,
For Shatrughan Sinha, it was Shotgun Sinha. For Zinat Aman, Zini Baby.
La Tagore for sure.
La Tagore for Sharmila Tagore. All these monikers have stood the test of time. And literally, these amazing film stars that we have are literally known by these monikers now globally, universally, everywhere. Do they ever come and thank you? Like, thank you for creating these amazing names for us that have literally are going to be eternal?
As a matter of fact, yes, which always surprises me. We are at Litfest frequently, like when Shatrughan had published his book, or when Sharmila is at a Litfest, and if they spot me in the audience, they always turn around and say, almost like, I don't know whether I have to feel like a culprit at that point, or someone who's... well, obviously, they love those names, or they wouldn't be making a special reference to them. But at the time when I was coining them, I was doing it with a sense of mischief, mischief.
You never thought that they stand the test of time, the way that they have.
I don't think of it. I don't think of legacy Moses. I'm not preoccupied with the thought of, are my books going to outlive me? I've written them. I've enjoyed writing them. The readers have enjoyed reading them. For me, it begins and ends with that.
I just, come on, show them some love. I'm coming in only to ask Shobha. You know, we were having this conversation earlier in a completely different context about women being boxed in by age. Not that we feel it, but that society does that to us. And I have a very special woman who's going to come out and award both of you and perform for us. But what is age to you?
Age is the age I'm born with and will die at. That's about it. It's a fact of life. I have never challenged it, or it has never made me feel insecure. In about 2 months' time, I'll be turning 78.
Wow.
And sometimes it's not, I don't think of it as an achievement. I've lived my life, and I've loved my life the way I've lived it, with all its fault lines. But age has not preoccupied me, let's put it that way. But yes, society is ageist. Society is cruel. They put women into the cage of age much more than they do men. Men become distinguished with age.
Yes.
Women become buddhis. And women at 30 are now called auntie-jis.
Yes.
So we have to really ignore the people out there who are so foolish in creating these kind of categories. Because each decade comes with its own enriching platforms and its own learnings.
Absolutely.
And you to love it and feel it and be it and let the world know that you're proud of it. And never ever shrink away from it and feel in any way apologetic for being who you are and at whatever age you are at. Own it.
I couldn't agree more, but on that note, I want to introduce a very wonderful person who's come all the way from Pune. She's called the Warrior Ajji. And I don't know how many of you recently saw, she was performing in Gujarat, and you know, Akshay Kumar was in the audience and Dimple Kapadia was in the audience. They couldn't believe their eyes. They couldn't believe it because she's in her 80s and she does this spectacular performance, and I want us to put our hands together to please welcome Shanta Pawar ji on stage, because you're going to see something incredible from her. आपका पहले परफॉर्मेंस देखना है सबको. Look at these dandas. ओहो, ये शोभा मैम जो है ना, अभी बोल रही थी कि उम्र से क्या होता है, जितना दिल में उम्र है उतना उम्र है। आपका उम्र पूछ सकती हूँ मैं?
88 है।
बैठेंगी? बैठ जाइए। ओके, बैठिए बैठिए बैठिए। हाँ, ये बताइए, थक गए? थक गया?
हाँ,
थक गए?
88 हो गया ना,
हाँ
तो थोड़ा थक रहा है,
हाँ।
थक लगता है।
अच्छा, बस आपको ये, आप रेस्ट करो। आपसे बस एक बात पूछना था, किसने सिखाया आपको ये मैजिक करना?
माँ बाप ने।
माँ बाप ने?
हाँ,
और आपको लगता है 88 पे कैसे करते हैं?
घर में बैठने के लिए कोई भी नहीं है, भगवान है, आप माँ बाप है। मेरे पास अनाथ बच्चे लोग हैं, उनको पढ़ाई कराती, शादी भी कराती, रहने को छत भी देती। कभी कर्जा में डूब जाती तो महीना महीना में कर्जा लौटा देती, किसी मांगती नहीं।
किसी से मांगते नहीं?
नहीं।
आपको पानी दो, पानी।
थोड़ा पानी पिया तुम।
So Shobha, when we're talking about age being just a notional thing, she's 8. I mean, look at her. Amazing, huh? अजी, एक आखिरी सवाल। ये जो लोग कहते हैं कि अभी उम्र हो गया, अभी रेस्ट करो, उनको आप क्या कहेंगी?
मेरे जैसे बनने का। घर में नहीं सोने का, घर में सोने का नहीं। ऐसा नहीं।
Can we please have, I thought Shanta ji should award Shobha Day as two women for whom age is irrelevant come together. Can I please have the awards on stage? शांता जी, आपसे मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगी कि आप शोभा मैम जो है, इनको आप ये ट्रॉफी प्रेजेंट।
I want to give it to her.
अच्छा, फिर आप उनका दो पहले। ओके, थोड़ा आगे आओ ना शांता जी।
या तुम्ही इथे या.
अनिल,
इथे या.
शांता जी,
आणि हे तुमच्यासाठी आहे. हे तुम्हाला देते.
and
Thank you so much. Thank you.
can we have a huge round of applause for Shanta ji, Shobha Day, and Moses Singh? Extraordinary moment on stage right now. Once more, an encore. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Didi.
आपण घेऊन जाऊया बाहेर.
Thank you. Amazing. We can clap for her as she goes, no? Melu.
नहीं नहीं नहीं।
Will you just help her? दीदी, आपका जूता, जी, आपका जूता। मैंने पकड़ा बॉटल। I mean, imagine she was balancing on this bottle. Amazing. 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 Thank you, Shobha, Moses. Thank you, Shanta ji.